Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestle podcast. It's time for another special Manic Mondays as we continue our journey through 2004 of WWE. I am your host, Amerisnay, and joining me as always is Steve Neal.
Yes, we have done WrestleMania. We have pushed through the grandest stage of them all, where it all starts again. And by it all starts again, it means let's have a bunch of rematches from WrestleMania at Backlash. Yay! Backlash, the Raw pay-per-view from 2004. Man, let's fucking dive into this absolute bowl of nonsense.
Yeah, Raw pay-per-view, that's alarming in its own right. Brand-specific pay-per-views, which means limited levels of talent. Which means carny bollocks, to be fair. 13,000 people packed into the Wrestle place. Wrestle. That's the name of your arena. Fuck off, Canada.
State of your names of your arenas in North America. They are fucking horrendous.
Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Home of toothless aggression. Yeah, this is Chris Benoit's home. Beautiful stuff, and as we know, Chris Benoit certainly knows how to make himself at home. My lord. So yeah, Backlash 2004 from Canada. Also, the opening promo where apparently Chris Benoit has got lightning in a bottle. I don't know if you realise.
Oh, mate.
Create and destroy careers. Lightning won't strike the same place twice, but I will. Now, I will finish yours. Lightning in a bottle. The power. The image. It fuels me. It walks beside me. It haunts my thoughts. A strike of intensity. Flash of immortality. Lightning in a bottle. Tonight I strike. Tonight I strike. Tonight I strike. I've got lightning in a bottle. And so it begins again.
Triple H, lightning in a bottle. Shut your fucking mouth, Hunter. My God, it went on for about 3 days.
It has been 48 days. It was just going on and on and on. Opening contest is very, very strange. Ric Flair, who is again one half of the tag team champions, so I can only assume that him and Batista won them back, is facing Shelton Benjamin. Now, since WrestleMania, they've had a draft, which means that people have been separated. And of course, they could not wait to get Shelters away from Charlie Haas. And I completely understand that because Charlie Haas was a vacuum for charisma. So it's Shelton Benjamin versus Ric Flair. And this is the continuation of, some people might remember, very much in the Curtis Axel mold. What they do is Triple H says, I'll put him over. But he won't put him over properly. What he'll do is he'll lose by like DQ or count out or something like that. So Shelton Benjamin owned back-to-back wins against Triple H coming into this match, and of course this is to continue that. So it's Shelton Benjamin versus the legendary Ric Flair. Good old Shelters is now solo after the draft, so they're obviously pushing him as a single star, and we obviously know how that's going to work out. But at the meantime, people are quite high on Mr. Benjamin. What do you think of the opener?
Yeah, it was all right. It was okay. You know, Flair being Flair, doing Flair things, and being very entertaining, and Shelton Benjamin being, you know, crazy, springy, athletic, springs at his boots. It was decent. It was okay. It just, Shelton Benjamin was so good and still is so good. And, you know, we waxed lyrical about him a few times because athletically, he's just insane. You know, he was in that amazing class down in OVW with Batista, Randy Orton, John Cena, Brock Lesnar. And, you know, he kind of, you know, didn't do as well as those other guys. I wonder why. Can you spot the difference, kids? But yeah, it was fine. But as you say, it's with the benefit of hindsight. You look back and go, okay, he's had a pretty decent match, a credible match against Ric Flair. I thought it was quite entertaining, and he's got 2 quote unquote wins over Triple H, a distraction and leading to him getting a small package and a count out on Raw. Now he's got a victory on pay-per-view over the legendary Ric Flair. You know, he's going through Evolution by himself at this point in time. But where does that really lead to for Shelty B? Absolutely nowhere. To TNA, that's where it fucking leads. So yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, but he's one of the guys that I would suggest maybe WWE have dropped the ball on bigger than, almost anyone else that they've had on their kind of main roster ever. He's one of those real missed opportunities with his athleticism. And you think, the Young Bucks emergence and the uber athletic style of wrestling really coming to the forefront increasingly and incrementally over the last 10 years or so, you really could have had Shelton Benjamin at the forefront of that, really kind of pushing the envelope for a guy who wasn't Rey Mysterio size, but could do kind of a lot of Rey Mysterio-esque things. And nope, fuck you. Excuse me, have you got a tan? Get out. If it doesn't come out of a bottle, I don't want you in here. So I thought it was a credible match. What about you?
I actually really liked it. Yeah. I thought it was really good. I'm really enjoying Ric Flair in this era, actually. Ric Flair is 55 at this point and has a decent match. He bumps his ass off for Shelton Benjamin and goes through. It's Ric Flair, so you obviously have to temper your expectations from a technical standpoint, especially later in his life. But for 55, he does all the tropes of being Ric Flair, the front bumps and the idiotic overselling and stuff. Actually works really well. It gets a good reaction from the crowd. The crowd find it very amusing, and it also makes them feel more invested and happy to cheer and root for Shelton Benjamin. Like you say, it's astonishing he didn't do better. From an athletic standpoint, one of the finest wrestlers I think I've ever seen. We're not just talking about a guy who was, a great flippy wrestler. He was also a world-class mat technician. And famously, Shelton Benjamin owns the only actual amateur wrestling win over Brock Lesnar from the NCAA history. Brock Lesnar is a two-time NCAA amateur wrestling champion. That basically means you're the best college amateur wrestler in America. And Shelton Benjamin is the only guy to beat him in that entire run. He's got an incredible aptitude for athleticism, but the problem was he literally had zero charisma. He was only marginally better than Charlie Haas, which I think speaks a lot about him, and it was really disappointing. It's funny actually, because he's obviously on the WWE roster now as kind of an extra, and he came back and tagged with Chad Gable and things like that, but never found his footing. But I enjoyed this match. I gave it 3 out of 5. Thought it was really good, really nice, really fun. Love the front bump that Flair does. It just never gets old. There's a bit where Shelton Benjamin slaps him around the face and he just kind of stands there and goes and then just bumps. Great, love it. Really enjoyed that. Really funny, good entertainment value match. Ric Flair brings a little bit of that sort of sports entertainment, and of course Shelton Benjamin goes through his rather exciting, if not slightly underwhelming repertoire. I say underwhelming not necessarily from the athletic standpoint, but because we know what Shelton Benjamin would eventually become, and because of that, it's kind of hard to really enjoy and get excited about him as much. And I'm sure later down the line we're going to cover his crazy exploits when he was in those Money in the Bank matches, and those are when you're really going to see what Shelton Benjamin could do. And unfortunately, he was never given the opportunity to thrive in an environment. He would have. Shelton Benjamin. Do you know what Shelton Benjamin's problem was? He was 10 years too early. Yeah. If he turned up in this era, late sort of early to sort of mid to late 20s, should I say, he would have excelled beyond belief in this era. High athleticism, independent-tastic wrestlers. You're looking at guys like Daniel Bryan and Kevin Owens and AJ Styles and all the NXT guys. Shelton Benjamin turns up in his 20s in this environment. He's going to be a huge star, or albeit a match of the year factory. He turned up in an era where people were all about sports entertainment and not wrestling. Shelton Benjamin is not going to be able to go out there and have a sports entertainment match with John Cena. That's not how this works. Shelton Benjamin's credibility, his technique, his forte lies in a different approach, and that's probably why he went to places like New Japan and hooked up with Suzuki-gun, because ultimately that was going to be a far better placement for him than it was being in WWE at the time, and that's a shame. It was nobody's fault. He was just in the wrong time period. In the way that CM Punk fitted his time period beautifully, Shelton Benjamin was the reverse. That was just really unfortunate.
Young Shelton Benjamin versus Ricochet in NXT would have been fucking spectacular.
It really would have.
He would have been PWG-tastic, wouldn't he? Let's be honest. Shelton Benjamin would have been all over Bowler.
Yeah, exactly. He would have been the guy who would have won Bowler and just athletically would have set people apart. And I think in this day and age as well, he would have had far better access to the ability to create a character as well, instead of Shelton's mama, which is what we eventually got.
Excuse me, I don't know you, but I know your face. I'm Shelton Benjamin's mama.
Really? Shelton Benjamin's mom. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Val Venus.
Oh, yes. I have seen you in a movie or two. I believe so.
Mama.
Shh, baby mama talking.
Well, you know, I've done quite a few adult films. Let me think. Shaving Ryan's Privates. Glad He Ate Her. How about Harry Twatter?
Harry Twatter? Let me tell you something. I ain't never seen you before. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate, but I'm a good Christian woman. Do you hang with him?
No.
Let me tell you something. You don't hang around no homongers. You get your tail over here. Let me tell you something, mister. You going to hell.
Yeah, fun match, decent chemistry, 3 out of 5. Orton backstage hypes up the hardcore match. Not really much to approach here, just Orton backstage talking. Then we get this. So, I love Tajiri. I do. I think coming out of that 2001 angle, I really developed a love and appreciation for how much work and entertainment value that he was worth. Tajiri is just awesome. We love a bit of Tajas on this podcast. Much less so him wrestling Jonathan Coachman. This was shit.
Can we also just say, not only did he wrestle Jonathan Coachman, he was out-wrestled by Jonathan Coachman for large periods of this match.
I think I was furious. Yeah, think of this. This is as shit as I think it is, right? I gave it 1 out of 5. I thought it was terrible. And the thing that pissed me off was the fact that Jonathan Coachman, who looks like... Jonathan Coachman looks like a white man pretending to be black. That's what I get from Jonathan Coachman. He's the whitest black guy I've ever seen. And there are probably lines that the black community would have for him. Him out-wrestling Tajiri and putting him in a knee bar was the final straw for me. I was like, right, this match is fucking panned. I'm not having that. He puts Tajiri in a knee bar and, threatens to submit him. I'm like, no, unacceptable. The only thing about this match which is redeeming to me is that drop kick in the back of the head. That's it.
Yeah. That was beautifully stiff. It was fucking horrible. It was an absolute disgrace to watch. It went on far too long. It was, it was very competitive. Coach actually scores the win because Garrison Cade interfered and helped him out. He interfered by punching Tajiri in the face, I think, and that was all that was needed for a roll-up and a victory. Like, there was no... You didn't, steal in, hit a finisher, and roll out again behind the ref's back. It was just, here, have a slap to the face, and that's going to cause you to be given the free count, which was just, it just made Tajiri look so weak and poor. It was very early to put a piss break match on. It wasn't a wrestling match. It wasn't a sports entertainment match. It seemed to be there to get over the concept that Coach has been training hard and could actually be taken surprisingly seriously as a wrestler or potential wrestler. And it was almost like it was floating because King was really, putting over the, oh my God, look at him wrestle. Look at these moves that he's doing. And every time JR's sort of talking over the action because it's shit, King's trying to highlight, oh my God, Coach can wrestle, because that's clearly what Vince is screaming in their ears from the back. And it was just terrible. But the stupid thing is, the Coach probably did more moves in this match that we've seen out of Brock Lesnar in the last 5 years. That's probably true. I don't know if it's a definite factual statistic, but it's probably close. And that's embarrassing for everyone concerned. It's just, I fucking hated it. I abhorred this match.
It was fucking disgusting. That's all I have to say. I gave it 1 out of 5. That's it. 1 out of 5. Yeah, it doesn't have a place. It doesn't have a place on this card. And like you say, why are they putting this kind of match on so early? They normally have room for one of these matches, and you seem to find 2 or 3 of them on this pay-per-view. And this is brand specific for you. This is what happens when you have a limited roster. They don't
Sunday Night Heat is where this match belonged.
Yeah, tell me about it. It belongs in the backstage of Sunday Night Heat. Fucking disgraceful. So, we get these cheap shit vignettes. Triple H arrives backstage on Sunday Night Heat. You probably thought, yeah, nothing, nobody really cares, just a cheap vignette, right? I did, however, pick up on one thing. Did you notice what Triple H was carrying?
No, I didn't. Not to my memory.
So each guy arrives with their briefcase. And I get the distinct impression that Triple H forgot his briefcase, or the prop department failed, because Shawn Michaels turns up and he's got, like, you know, the classic traveling Willy suitcase. Benoit does it as well, you know. They've got a classic, you know, the pulley, the one you take on holiday with you. Triple H turns up with one of those giant metal cases that they keep machinery in, like a puzzle. And I'm like, and he's walking in, yeah, I'm the Game, and I'm going to do some Black and Decker. It's like, what are you doing exactly? Like, he's coming in with this giant metal case, the kind of case that Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns would throw at each other backstage. I was just like, very, very strange. It was a very small thing, but it just seemed to trigger me. And I just thought, you've clearly forgotten something that you should have brought with you. You can just tell that from looking at it. It just looked very, very awkward. So, yeah, that's my fun little thing. It's time for a WrestleMania rematch, mate, of sorts. Handicap match. Chris Jericho versus Christian and Trish Stratus. It continues. Finally, after what seems like 20 years together, JR calls out Lawler for incessantly banging on about tits. Right at the beginning of this match. So, premise is obviously exactly the same as the WrestleMania match, except that now we know that Trish is oh my god, the crowd as well were relentless at her as well, which I thought was unbelievable. Like, ferocious chance of slut. Right at the beginning of the match, JR's like, look at those, and Jerry Lawler, excuse me, he's like freaking out like over Trish's breasts, and he's like, oh my god, puppies and all this, and JR's like, have you never seen breasts before? Have you not? Just screaming at him like I'm for the monsoon. Bobby Heenan at him. This was very similar to the WrestleMania match in the sense of it gave you that welcome distraction from the carny crap. And I was really appreciative of that. This was a really good match. I actually thought, from a sports entertainment perspective, this was a better match than their WrestleMania match because it had the added value of Trish. I liked the story that was built around it. I love the incessant chasing of Trish throughout this match. Christian being the slimy little shitbag who kept cutting off Chris Jericho. I think everything really came together nicely in this match. And I think overall it was a far better offering than Mania.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, actually. I thought, again, it was just a good sports entertainment spectacle with decent wrestling thrown in there. It's, you know, Jericho and Christian, as we've, you know, said at Mania, two of the more underrated talents in so many ways. You know, Jericho's getting the love now that he's in AEW, ironically, that he kind of has deserved for the last 20 years. You know, the guy's an absolute hero. And this was very early, very young, very kind of green Trish, who was still short of really making an impact as, you know, a wrestler, and was still kind of chiefly sexy valet. You know, she did wrestle and she'd won some titles and stuff, but she was still principally sexy valet Trish. And yeah, it's weirdly Jericho in this kind of period as well is using like a step up in Zagori as his finisher. Like the amount of times he's reinvented himself, we've literally forgotten the amount of finishing moves that he's got in his arsenal. And obviously now a step up in Zagori we see 43 times in a Finn Balor match. Like, it's just a, you know, Seth Rollins, everyone does it. It is the indie move that everyone does everywhere all the time. And it wasn't really something that we'd seen a lot of. You know, Jericho's nicked it from, you know, somewhere in Japan probably, or Mexico, and he's using it on big stages, which was cool. Yeah, it was a good fun match. And yeah, I've again written down here, Jerry is just a twat, as always when Trish is involved. But yeah, he was just in uber dickhead mode all the way through this night, actually. Whenever any of the women did anything, he was a complete prick. But it started very much here. It was but it was still a good match. Yeah, I thought it was kind of a 3 out of 5. If you're gonna do ratings, that was where I'd probably put it. It was a good solid match.
Yeah, I gave it 3.5. Really thought it was good fun. Really enjoying Christian, actually, in this era. Do you know what? Massively underappreciated. When it comes to it, overall, I think really underappreciated, actually, in his line of work. Like, he just had so much to offer, and I think it's a bit of conjecture, but I really believe that if he was more of a body guy, if he just had that little bit more bulk and that little bit more of a, you know, because Edge always kind of had a little bit more of a size to him. I think not much more even. I think
taller when he Edge.
Yeah, Edge was
Yeah.
taller, and he kind of just. It was difficult for Christian because they both had the same look.
Mm.
They were both guys who had long, flowing hair, were a bit, geeky Canadians, reeking of awesomeness. And when they separated, obviously Christian had to go the other way, so he had to cut his hair a bit. And I actually really love this Christian. Like, I think he's just phenomenal and really entertaining to watch. However, because he couldn't sort of take the look that Edge had with the trench coats and the sunglasses and the kind of heavy metal vampire look anymore, he kind of got left behind. And his charisma was fantastic, and he always was. I mean, he was called Captain Charisma, wasn't he, later on in an era where they were really struggling for great characters. But yeah, ultimately Christian's legacy is one of massively underrated talent for me. But another fine example what guys can do when they're given the proper platform, and these are the kind of guys, just leave them to their own devices and they'll produce. And I actually thought Trish was really entertaining in this match. Don't mind the fact that she's stonkingly fit. She was also just incredibly entertaining and funny, and actually really got the essence of sports entertainment. And I also feel sorry for the women. Like, you've got to put up with this cretinous shitbag Jerry Lawler. And on top of that, you've got to this was an era, we're coming out of that era, aren't we, where Vince McMahon's like, I want you to bark like a dog. These kind of things that nowadays would not have any place on the main roster. But at that time, women were just women. They're just voluptuous tits. They don't have charisma. They don't have personalities. That's how Vince eyes, the women in this era. And it is astonishing to me that Jerry Lawler is still employed by WWE to this day as a lead commentator on Raw. I find that amazing. Like, when you consider where we've come to in terms of women's wrestling and the evolution of women as a whole, as women's athletes, like, I'm just astounded that he has a place at all in WWE. But it is what it is. But yeah, fun match, entertaining, brought me back from the doldrums of fucking Coachman and Tajiri. Eugene backstage. Yeah, I'm going to go off on Eugene, but I'm going to wait until the penultimate match. But yeah, basically, for anyone who doesn't know, and I'm sure pretty much everybody does, Eugene's gimmick was essentially that he was a mentally retarded adult who believed himself to be a WWE superstar. So he would come out and, very much like we would as kids, mimic all his favourite wrestlers and stuff like that. So he's backstage staring at the Divas magazine, and then he just walks into the women's locker room where Gail Kim is looking quite tasty. And yeah, so it's just a really cretinous thing. The only redeeming factor of this entire thing is William Regal coming in to go, Eugene, you can't be in here, dragging him out, and then just stopping to take a moment to admire Gail Kim's music. He just goes, ooh, nice set. Proper British as well. Like, hello. I just thought he was going to start going, ding dong, madam. I love that bit. Other than
very
that,
carry on.
Yeah, it was very carry on. He's so camp and so funny that you don't find that kind of thing offensive. There's a way of doing it and not making it tasteless. And unfortunately, it was very much American and British humor in one segment. The first half of it was the American car crash toilet humor style, look at them tits. And then the second half was like, hello, dreadfully sorry, I seem to have walked in on you wearing your bra. Like, this kind of British trope that went with it. And thank God for William Regal, because without him, I would have quite literally vomited during this segment. Also, the insinuation that Molly Holly, because she's bold, is somehow terrifying and ugly, and Eugene screams at her, I thought was a little bit ridiculous. Okay, so to some people she may not look as hot with her hair, but it's not like it made her grotesque by any means. It was such a drastic overreaction of it. And of course, this feeds in nicely to the Women's Championship match. Victoria defends her title against Lita. I thought this was fantastic. What did you think?
Lawler was fucking terrible throughout, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a really good match. But again, it's just Lawler being king of the fucking incels all the way through. A complete prick. But a really good solid match. Both come out looking strong because, Victoria wins with an inside cradle, and that kind of means that Lita doesn't look weak, because that can happen to anyone. It's just, one of those spots when done properly at the end of a match that just works. And it worked. I thought it was great. It just would have been better without Jerry Lawler on commentary. Gail Kim and Molly Holly come down and attack both after the match, which was sort of, slightly random, but okay, and sort of explained sort of why they were there and getting their gear on and whatever before this match. At least they had some kind of involvement, but set stuff up going forward, which is great, but it was just very random. But the match itself I thought was fantastic. We forget how good Lita was. Like, a lot of her legacy is obviously Team Extreme and being there with the Hardys and, her rivalry with Trish. But Lita had so many good rivalries and good matches. She was one of those, talents that you could trust to put anyone in there with them, and they'll have a passable, decent match. And yeah, she's someone who Trish has kind of eclipsed her really with a number of title reigns, and I think just how she looked as well. But Lita brought, this alternative vibe, and yeah, man, I loved Lita. I was bang into Lita as a kid, and I think the whole Edge thing sort of hurt Lita as well. I think that's kind of, her most memorable moment in her career is the whole consummating the marriage live on Raw shtick. But yeah, I loved Trish. I remember when she first came in with S.A. Rios, I'm being like, wow, what the shit am I watching here? Seeing her watching Sunday Night Heat on Channel 4 and seeing her doing moonsaults and stuff to help S.A. Rios pick up spawny victories was great. Really good match. And Victoria, again, we said it at WrestleMania as well. One of the real underrated talents that we don't talk about enough when we're talking about the evolution of women and all the people that have lent their hand to their journey. Victoria was a really good, capable hand, a good wrestler. First and foremost, wasn't kind of all about, bra and panties matches. And actually, when you look Molly Holly, Lita, Trish on her journey, Victoria, and Gail Kim, there was some real talent on this roster to have good women's matches if they're given the opportunity at the time. And actually, they were given a decent amount of time here. So a little bit of credit in an era where not very much credit is given to the use of women, but they actually had a good match. If it wasn't for Jerry Lawler, it would have been really standout as well. But Jerry Lawler just fucking saps the joy out of it.
This is a fine example of what happens with and how important commentary is to a match and how much it can sell a story. It's so fucking over the top. Like, you won't stop insinuating that Victoria's hot. Like, he's trying to push it. He's like, oh, she's so hot. Oh, yeah, she's so hot. Oh, yeah, JR, she's really hot. So shut up. Shut up and, call the match, mate. There's a level to it. And at a certain point in time, Jerry Lawler certainly had his value. But at this point, it's 2004. We're 3 years removed from the end of the Attitude Era. We're getting into a different kind of era of wrestling. And at this point, you can already see that he is detrimental to the product. And it would go on for a lot fucking longer. And it would hurt a lot of the product, especially the women's product. And yeah, this match actually is really standout. One of the better women's matches you'll see from this era. Victoria is the most underrated women's wrestler for my money, in WWE history. And the reason I say this is because nobody talks about her ever. Nobody remembers her. Nobody says, oh yeah, Victoria and her part in the women's evolution. Turns out she was actually crucial to the women's evolution because she was, when Beth Phoenix came in, for instance, she signaled a new kind of intent, power as well as beauty. And Victoria was the first of that. Victoria was the first Beth Phoenix. She was in there well before doing what she did and doing it well. And yeah, she's very likable, very attractive, very cool, very athletic, very accomplished, very powerful. Her and Trish Stratus had, I believe, the first ever women's hardcore match at Survivor Series 2002, which really set a standard for what women's wrestling could be if it was given the amount of time and appreciation. And here we are, her and Lita, who is, again, Lita's always remembered more because she was so striking and so different. And you're right, the whole Edge thing absolutely hurt her credibility as a wrestler because after that, she was just regarded as, the whore, which is really disappointing because it couldn't be further from the truth. And the character damaged her reputation, I suppose, as a legitimate athlete. But hey, it's wrestling, isn't it? You do what you got to do to get over. And admittedly, I thought her and Edge were incredibly entertaining as heels. But yeah, this is a great match. Really good stuff. Really athletic, really technical. This actually wouldn't seem that out of place on Raw nowadays, or on the undercard of a pay-per-view nowadays. I think these, especially Victoria, is somebody I'd actually like to see maybe come back and have a little bit of a run. We've seen Beth Phoenix come back, Lita, Trish Stratus. Wouldn't really be against the idea of seeing Victoria maybe come back and have a decent match with someone like a Nikki Cross or whatever. I think she would really add a lot of benefit. And I think, if anything, I took from this match was that people need to remember Victoria a lot more. She was awesome. Really enjoyed her. I know that she's moved on and developed a decent life for herself outside of wrestling, which is always fantastic to see because not all wrestlers come out of it the other side, as we're going to talk about probably later in this pay-per-view. But I loved it. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I think this is the kind of match, again, I've said here, if this is not in the era that it is, maybe people wouldn't appreciate it as much. I imagine, modern day wrestling fans would probably watch this and go, it's all right, it's nothing special. But you have to also put into context what it meant at the time, because we're still in an era where, we just come out of a WrestleMania where the only way the women could have a title match is if one of them shaved their head bald. So we're still in an era where Vince McMahon thinks, women are subservient and should not be allowed to wrestle, or, not in part. I mean, look at the way they treated Trish in that angle. You can guarantee Vince McMahon must have been fapping himself ferociously hearing people call Trish a slut. Hey, there she is. That's my slut. I made her. It's cretinous. And these women went out there and put on a fantastic spectacle. And speaking of fantastic spectacles, we're here for one reason, really. When you say Backlash 2004, any wrestling aficionado will tell you it's all about one match, a certain hardcore match. May as well be a death match, let's be honest. Mick Foley as Cactus Jack has returned. As we know, he's been building. He had this wonderful match at WrestleMania. We, really enjoyed the sports entertainment spectacle that was him and The Rock versus Evolution. And this is the continuation of that. And this is really the blow-off. And in some ways, Mick Foley is the gatekeeper to Randy Orton's stardom in this match, and we need to see something different from Randy Orton. We've seen so many great things about him. He looks $1 million. He can wrestle well. He's an arrogant little shitbag. He's got decent promo about him, but does he have that next level, that brutality, that shift in gear that can make him feel different, that can make him go to a place that people wouldn't expect him to? And that's where Mick Foley steps in, as he always does so admirably, and he is in full psycho form here. This is a very famous match, Cactus Jack versus Randy Orton. It's for the IC title as well, which everyone will forget because the IC title is a prop for this match. Nobody cares. This is all about Orton and can he survive the onslaught of the psychopathic, maniac tendencies of a Mick Foley as Cactus Jack, which of course is the most hardcore and dangerous of his alter egos. I thought it was incredible. Do you think this stands the test of time as one of the all-time great hardcore matches? Because it is regarded as that.
Yes. Mick Foley regards this as the best match of his career, and it's probably between, in my opinion, it's probably between this, his match Mind Games in 95 against Shawn Michaels, and his match at the 2000 Royal Rumble with Triple H, which are all just absolutely amazing. Mick Foley is one of the, but he gives there's a great promo package beforehand, and Foley's one of the greatest minds for using violence to tell a story that professional wrestling has ever known, if not the preeminent mind on that. It's impossible to overstate his influence, but yet it's such an understated influence in so many ways. I think particularly among the modern WWE audience, where we don't get hardcore wrestling really anymore. We don't get Extreme Rules anymore. And when we talk about kind of hardcore matches and stuff like that, we really think about Paul Heyman and ECW, and they get all the credit. And Mick Foley, in that sense, goes under the radar, and his legacy has been more kind of big Hell in a Cell spots and comedy stuff, really. some of his Mankind stuff, Rock and Sock Connection, Mr. Socko, all of that. And there's a wonderful spot in this match where he pulls out Mr. Socko and he picks up Barbie, his barbed wire bat, and he's looking between the two as to which one he's going to use. Like, his inner personalities are at war, trying to decide who is he going to be. Is he going to be funny, friendly, Santa Mick Foley and use the comedy mandible claw prop, the sock with the face drawn on, to try and pick up the old school Mankind win? Or is he going to be lunatic, I just want blood, I want pain, I want to be vicious, Cactus Jack, and use the barbed wire bat? And he picks the barbed wire bat. He's just such a good storyteller, and he's done this for so many people. Again, the Mind Games match with Shawn Michaels in 95, you can argue without that match and how that helped catapult Shawn Michaels and show that he could have a completely different kind of match to anything we'd seen him in before. He was the pretty boy. He wasn't supposed to go out there and brawl. He wasn't supposed to go out there and be hardcore and be viciously aggressive. He wasn't supposed to be thrown around into concrete and stuff. He did that. Without that, does he have the Hell in a Cell match in 97 with The Undertaker? Is he the guy to be in that spot with Taker? I'm not so sure he is. Do they have faith that he can be in that kind of an environment and excel and tell that kind of a story? With Triple H, he was already the WWF champion when they had the match for the title of the Royal Rumble and was already kind of on the top. But what pushed him into, legendary Hall of Fame career status was that match at the 2000 Royal Rumble that proved how tough he was, how he could go the distance, how he could bleed all over the place and be thrown around and battered, but still come out on top and refuse to quit and lay down, and how much that title meant for him. It changed the way we perceived him as an audience. And this is what Mick Foley did again for Randy Orton. He's the least selfish wrestler there has ever been, because his whole career has been about creating stars. He did it for The Rock as well at the Royal Rumble in 99. Just allowing The Rock to go completely apeshit and trash him with a fucking chair with his hands handcuffed behind his back. Just elevated The Rock to a new level again, because fucking hell, this guy is a vicious psychopath who will do whatever it takes to win. The spots with the barbed, like, they got the barbed wire board out, and the spots that Foley takes on that are horrendous. He reopens all of his old scars on his arm that he had from his old barbed wire matches in Japan with Terry Funk, etc., and the glass matches and the nails, bed of nails matches and all that fucking shit. And the long scars he has down his arm, he reopens them up on the barbed wire board. And literally at one point, the referee has to peel the barbed wire out of his flesh. It's savage. This match is so violent. He gets out the lighter fluid as if he's going to set the table on fire, which is kind of pre-warning to his match with Edge in a year or two. And doesn't do that because Bischoff comes out and stops him and says the whole event will be shut down if he does it. So, instead, okay, fuck it. I'll, just go to the barbed wire board and the thumbtacks, not a problem. Randy's bumping the thumbtacks. We see them all sticking in his back as well and in his hands when he's pulling it out of his fingers and stuff, and the webbing between his fingers, fucking horrendous. You feel that pain in the audience, like the spots and the way they sacrifice themselves. And after this, you really did look at Randy Orton in a different way. Like, he had shown he wasn't just, as you said before, the pretty boy who's technically a good wrestler, a decent promo, who's young. This was a guy who is the real deal now. And this really was the making of Randy Orton's career more than any other moment up to that point. Being an Evolution and, winning the IC title and all of that stuff is nothing in comparison to getting a win against Cactus Jack, who's in the best fucking shape that he's been in since the 80s at this point, in Cactus Jack's own match, Cactus Jack's own environment. It was massive, and the story they told was masterful. And this is where Jerry Lawler and JR earned their money, because on commentary they were brilliant, conveying the drama, conveying the disgust at the violence they were seeing, and conveying the toughness of Randy Orton. And after the match, Lawler's really kind of incessant at JR of, how can you only say he's tougher than a $2 steak? How tough is this kid? You're downplaying it. It's not enough. It was the only part of Jerry Lawler's night that I enjoyed. But yeah, I love it, mate. It's one of my kind of favorite. It probably is my favorite Randy Orton match, and it's one of my kind of classic go-tos, really, because they just tell such a good story.
Yeah, famous in every sense. Not really much else to add, to be honest. Covered it beautifully. Yeah, I just remember watching it, and the spot that really stands out to me is the RKO countered straight into the thumbtacks.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of them just stuck in him, and at this point he's topless as well. There's something really cool about this match, and this is proof that a match can be a match of the night and compelling and exciting and enthralling, and it doesn't have to have, it can be something more edgy, because these matches are frowned upon. I mentioned recently at a training session that I'd like to do a death match. I quite like the concept of them. I quite like the idea, and I think in the right environment I'd enjoy it. As a once in a blue moon kind of spell. I don't think I'd be able to do the Jimmy Havoc thing, but I certainly believe it's something that I could certainly get a level of interest and intrigue and creative desire from. And I imagine that's why Mick Foley enjoyed it so much. Something that Mick Foley always said, and he says it actually in his promo package, doesn't he? He says, I've never really seen hardcore as a style of match, more so the passion and the physicality that I bring to the match in forms of its psychology and stuff. And yeah, I remember saying this at training, and people sort of looking at me like turning their nose at me like, ugh, only, trash people do that. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think in the right environment, if it's done correctly, hardcore wrestling is vital to telling a story further down the line. You can't have these intense rivalries between such iconic people if it doesn't escalate in terms of its violence. Not everybody is a Chris Benoit and a Kurt Angle. Even some of the most technically adept wrestlers, people like Kurt Angle and stuff, have been inside Hell in a Cell. It's the way you deliver the gimmick. This is a magical example of how violent, brutal, bloody, almost bordering on disgusting and grotesque hardcore wrestling can truly further and impress a storyline beyond the tropes of standard wrestling and technical wrestling. This is a masterpiece in storytelling. It is a masterpiece in violence. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the all-time great hardcore matches, and it is most definitely one of Randy Orton's peak performances of his entire career. Not to mention, of course, Mick Foley, but we come to expect that from him. What Mick Foley does for Randy Orton in this match cannot be understated. He gives him that extra level, and like you say, the way that Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton is kind of in Shawn Michaels' spot from years before, and this is the match that proves that Randy Orton is, there's a reason why Randy Orton would later on, be known as a 13-time WWE champion, and it's because of moments like this. Because this would have given the company faith. Vince McMahon would have seen him driving himself in the thumbtacks like that. A guy doesn't, let's be honest, doesn't have to when you look as good as Randy Orton does. You don't have to do stuff like that. And he was willing to do that spot and willing to say, no, watch me do it. And that would have shown something to people backstage, to his contemporaries, to his peers, and most importantly, to the people who invest in him as an individual and a character. And they would have seen that and said, yeah, Randy Orton is the bee's knees, man. This is the reason why we want to push forward as him as the face of the company. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. I thought it was dangerously close to a 5-star. If I'm being super nitpicky, I find it difficult to give a match of this style a 5-star, just because the wrestling quality is not going to be there as much as it would be in other matches. But that's obviously just par for the course. But if you're rating it based solely on a hardcore match, it's a 5-star match, I think. But it was just fucking awesome. I really loved the elbow drop as well off the stage as well. I thought that was really good. Lovely to see that he never forgot the, I like the fact, because you mentioned, didn't you, the fact that it was a throwaway move at WrestleMania 20. And that seemed quite disappointing from that perspective.
Yeah.
And in this environment, actually, this worked really well. My only nitpick would be that Randy Orton took a lot of damage, got thrown off the stage, then the elbow drop, and then just kicked out. And you're like, and I know what they're trying to do is the resilience, and it's fine. Mm-hmm. But for me, I felt like this was the kind of thing that should have ended a match, really. But at the same time, I admire the fact that they were, this Mick Foley, classic Foley. He's like, yeah, I'm going to throw everything at you, and I don't have a problem with you kicking out as long as you earn it. So yeah, it was at the time it was a massive shock. I remember watching it, and it was a bit of a shock to the system watching the whole match. But over the test of time, it has stood up beautifully. Right after this, I can hear Steve Neal screaming because, yeah, there's an advert for Cena's Word Life DVD.
Your boy has got a DVD and it's hot like flame. The new John Cena joint, Word Life is a name, baby. Old school battle raps like me against Rikishi. Kurt Angle, Big Show, you know they can't see me. Catch me up in Iraq, punking out Vinnie Mac. Giving Steph's a smack, and your boy is back. Uncut footage, bonus matches galore. Cop at the shop zone of your video store. They don't got it in stock? Here's what you do. Take your shoulder off, then tell the manager. John Cena, Word Life, available now.
Yeah.
Just watching it, and it's like, it's so good and it's so bad at the same time. And I can just hear Steve going, "It's all bad. There isn't anything good. Fuck you." I can just hear screaming at him, like, "I hate you saying that." It's Vanilla Ice-tastic, but I loved it. I really did. Really, really enjoyed it. I just thought it was great shilling. Yeah, every now and then you see these fantastic old WWE adverts for terrible things, whether it be Halloween merch or whatever, and this is right up there. As I've got to find it and I've got to splice it because it is that good.
It was shit.
Fucking brilliant. And the silence to boot as well. Absolutely awesome. As we get back to it, JR is being accosted by Lawler, who is insistent that he give Randy Orton the props he deserves. At which point he says,
Why don't you kiss my please?
Great time with that. Triple H is backstage with Todd Grisham. This is a great line. He says, "You went from a legend killer to a legend," when he's praising Randy Orton. Really like that. I thought that was really cool. You know, you could tell Trips obviously had a lot of love for Randy Orton. He always says that in his DVD. He says that, I never really saw the bad side of Randy Orton and other people did, because, surprise, probably couldn't see it past that giant nose of yours, bruv. But he then, of course, goes on to discuss the match, the main event. And, of course, it's
lightning.
Yeah, right. His promo's great. He's in Todd Grisham like, "It's time for me to beat the Benoit." This really annoyed me as well, because he says this line right, and I was waiting for it. I thought, if anyone can get away with it, it's you. And he says, like, this is the biggest missed opportunity of Triple H's entire career for me. He says, getting a win over HBK would be sweet, but a win over Benoit in his home country on Benoit Day, that would be where the money's at. I was like, no, you say too sweet. You say too sweet. It is your thing. It is the Clicks thing, you cretin. Like, you had every opportunity to say it, and he didn't. I was like, you fucking ruined it, you cretin. You, of all people, who buys into that Kool-Aid Click, too sweet signaling bullshit, and you wouldn't do it. Fuck you, Triple H. You ruined it. Still, are you ready, sir, for what could arguably be described as the greatest tag team match in the history of wrestling? This is James Ellsworth worthy, this shit. La Resistance versus the guys who should try the chicken McNuggets, you fat son bitch. Remember those boys? It's the Hurricane and Rosie, who is the absolute shit. Superhero in training. This, I've got written down here, 1 out of 5, get out of my fucking face. I'm going to let you have a little bit of a word before I go full mental-tastic over Eugene.
I've always liked Hurricane, and I've said that many times on this podcast, and we've been talking about his matches from WCW or when he first came into WWF. I think he's a really good, capable worker. I think he's very charismatic. I think he's a great entertainer. But this is just garbage, and La Resistance were just garbage. Just right, we hate the French. The French aren't backing us up to what we want in like Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever fucking we're bombing in 2004. Bit of both. So we're now going to lampoon them on our television show as being, the cowards who backed out of World War II or whatever. Fucking nonsense. We threw up our fucking flags and surrender, all that shit, right? And it's just shit. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible creative to watch. It was a bad match. And then Eugene comes down and runs the ropes for about 3 solid minutes for absolutely no explanation whatsoever until William Regal kind of, is his carer that takes away Uncle Eric Bischoff's fucking disabled nephew. And it's awful, right? I have my sister-in-law has learning difficulties. So, mentally, she's the age of 5 or 6, and she's actually 30, I think, turning 30 this year. It's crazy that this kind of a character, as being a comedy, humorous character, was put on TV. And we consider, it was 15 years ago. It's 2004. 2004, though. It's not that long ago that, we stopped doing, carny freak shows where we paraded out the disabled or fucking parodies of the disabled to entertain the public because, look how fucking stupid they are. And that's what this is. Vince McMahon is and always has been a fucking carny circus fucking prick. All he's ever wanted to do is put on a freak show for laughs. That is his exact sense of humor. And that's what Eugene represents. It is terrible creative. And this isn't controversy. This isn't pushing the envelope. This isn't edgy. This isn't starting a conversation about an important topic or any other excuse that people can make. It was just a really, really bad taste, awful attempt at comedy and humor that was just fucking juvenile and terrible. And it wasn't funny then, and it isn't funny watching it back now. It was offensive then, and it's offensive now. It was just awful and pointless. And the thing is, the lad who did it and does it, by all reports, everything that anyone's ever said about the guy, he's a nice guy behind the scenes. He was given an opportunity to be on the WWE and to get over. And you know what? Shame on everyone. He fucking did get over. And they worked hard to get him over. He was in segments with The Rock. He was in segments with Triple H. Everyone was putting over fucking Eugene. He was literally the hottest property in the company at one point, which is ridiculous. And again, by all intents and purposes, he was a perfectly capable worker. And he played the role as he was instructed to. But he's still playing that fucking role and using it to sell tickets and sell merch and make a living, rather than saying, yeah, that was something I did back then. Now I'm just going to go out and be a wrestler. And, I was formerly known as Eugene, but I'm not going to do the Eugene stuff anymore because, it's not quite right. He's still doing it. And that is fucking shameful, to be quite honest. That's where I get really pissy. I get people doing what they need to do to get over under Vince McMahon. I get that, what we said about Lita earlier with the Edge stuff. I get that. It is what it is. That's who he is. The boss says do this, you kind of do it. Okay. Even if I accept that premise, the fact that he's still doing it now on the indies is ridiculous. And I understand we've all got to make a living, but it's unacceptable. Fucking hated it. I hated Eugene. The whole thing around it was awful. Hate watching it back. It's so uncomfortable. And I fucking hated this match. It was awful, disgusting, disgraceful, bag of shit. Go for it, mate.
Oh, I would, but you beautifully and so eloquently covered it. I'm not going to add to
Sorry,
that.
mate.
That's fine. It's absolutely fine. I was like, oh, you're going to get it now, Vince. Oh, you're going to get buried. I'm going to kill you. I was literally itching for it. It made me so angry, but you so beautifully covered it and so eloquently covered it. And obviously, I know your sister-in-law very well, and I've sort of seen her at the weddings and things like that. And she's just such a wonderful beacon of light to so many people. If anyone's been around, her, they will know that she's just she just brings warmth and excitement and colour to her room. And to see WWE as a whole and for creative and Vince McMahon to use that kind of scenario to try and benefit themselves and, look at the freaks is beyond distasteful and disgusting. And Yeah, I don't need to add anything else to that. And as far as the match goes, what a pile of trash. Like, La Resistance can feck off. They can't. This so like you're hated in Canada. You're Canadian sympathisers, and you're hated by the Canadian crowd. You are awful. The whole thing can fuck right off, and I felt so sorry for the Hurricane. And I'll tell you what, as well, Rosie, like, you know, you're not getting away from it that easily, Sunshine. I know it's been very hard for you. Um, what a difference him and Umaga made. There's a difference between two guys. Talk about, you know, Umaga was incredible, I thought. Truly underrated. And then on the flip side, you got Rosie, who is, you know, by all intents and purposes, the same kind of person, really. Same body type, same kind of destructive moveset, and he's running around. I'll tell you what, right? My trainers can no longer critique me for not having the right coloured kick pads at a show. Like, because he looked like, I mean, I know he admittedly, the gimmick is he's supposed to look shit, but my God, he looked terrible. It was trash beyond belief. And this is a very accomplished wrestler from the Anoa'i family. You know, the most famous Samoan dynasty in history, and this motherfucker's parading around looking like he's wearing the Moldovan home kit in a fucking friendly international against England. The state of it, bruv. The state of it. Yeah, we got a nice little vignette showing Edge's return. Of course, we were told that Edge was coming, phrasing, at WrestleMania. And of course, he has returned. Speared Bischoff on draft night and then got into it with Kane. Also, Johnny Nitro got speared. See you in TNA, bruv. Edge versus Kane. Edge's first match in 14 months. And also, wow, this guy's a magnet for damage. He's got a broken hand. He's only been back bloody 4 weeks, and he's got a broken hand already. Legitimate as well, apparently. Not just a working broken hand. This was a legitimate broken hand, so the sources say. This is when the crowd start getting ready for the smarky cunt shit, because this is obviously the penultimate match of the night, and they're ready. They're fucking ready for it. They've had enough. And then they see Earl Hebner, and it's like, oh, you're getting it now, Sunshine. WWE, since Survivor Series, have not really made too many massive appearances, had it, in Canada? The odd fleeting appearance in Raw. They hadn't been back to Montreal, at least not that I'm aware of. If they had, they certainly hadn't included Shawn Michaels, and boy, you're going to get it in a minute, Sunshine. But Edge versus Kane is... It's funny, I thought this was going to be great, because I remember Test versus Kane and being really excited about this. I'm realising more and more as I watch Kane that his better accomplishments come with working with guys who are bigger. Big guys, hosses, tough guys, you know, the big boot specialists, the elbow drop guys. Edge is a little bit too finessed, I think, for this style of match. That being said, it's not too bad. It's not terrible by any means, but it's a little lackluster. I'm seeing Edge, and I think this is an unfortunate period to watch if you want to see the greatness of Edge. Like, we haven't really watched an era where Edge is the star, have we? We haven't seen, you know, the rated R superstar. We're still before that. This is when he's still that annoying, plucky face, and ultimately he would go on to be the incredible draw that he was as a world champion, as a rated R superstar. This is clearly, obviously, Edge still finding his way as a character. And yeah, he's definitely becoming more edgier. And yeah, sorry everyone. He's definitely becoming, you know, a bit more, I don't know, just a little bit more graphic, shall we say. There's definitely some sort of raw component to his character that's coming through. He feels a lot more dangerous, not so cookie cutter. But this is just too early on to really appreciate it. And also at this point, Kane, you know, he's lost the mask. There's a lot of luster's gone from the actual character itself. He's been humanized too much, and then they tried to go down the psychotic mentality role, haven't they, where he's not actually burnt and stuff, and that ruined a lot of the wonderful suspension of disbelief with what Kane was as a character. So ultimately, it's a match, and it's a half decent one. I think I gave it 2.5 out of 5. It's okay, it's fine, it's very middle of the road. There's some good spots, and I like the way that Edge hung in there, because realistically you would expect Kane to give him a fucking good shit kicking, and he certainly would have back in the day. So it's quite weird to see Kane more humanized, but it did its job. It just didn't do it with too much pizzazz.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. You know, it was okay. It was fine. Two very good workers. and it was okay. I never really liked Kane without a mask that much. Never really revved my engines, to be honest. And again, Kane's coming out of this, hot feud with, kind of bringing the Undertaker back, forcing the Undertaker to be the dead man again for the first time in 5 years. This, real pivotal moment in the history of the WWE. And then he sort of goes into this kind of nothing feud off the back of nothing with Edge, and jobs out when he's returning after 15 months with this shit stipulation of if he uses the cast on his broken hand during the match, then it's an instant disqualification, or what fucking just nonsense. It's just nonsense stipulations around a match that really didn't need it. It was in the wrong place on the card. It felt to me this should have been on quite early on the card, to be honest, and been one of those things that kind of really rev the crowd up and amp the crowd up with the returning Canadian and all that. But this was just before the main event, which is always a difficult spot in WWE, and it's usually the spot where Vince puts in a piss break match. And he kind of, maybe almost should have, he did the piss break match because of Cactus and Randy, and it wasn't quite right. So I felt for them being in that spot was a difficult one, but yeah, it was fine. It was all right. It was kind of a 2.5 star, 2-star affair, wasn't it? It was fine.
Yeah, it's just there to serve a purpose. It's a vehicle to help Edge, further his. Yeah. I mean, fair play to Edge.
Good win for him. Yeah.
Poor old Kane is taking a right shit kicking, isn't he? Fucking gets buried by his brother at WrestleMania, and then here he is being thrown to the walls against Edge. It's and also a very unique choice. Like, if Edge is just coming back from a severe neck injury, I would have thought that putting him in there with someone like Kane wouldn't necessarily be the smartest choice, really. Build him up to the heavy hitter shit, but fuck it, WWE.
Safe worker though, isn't he?
Yeah,
Kane,
that's one thing I was like.
Yeah,
can't get safer than Kane. He is a phenomenally safe. I mean, I'm learning this as I go. Being a big guy that's safe is a real nice commodity to be in wrestling, because I've seen a lot of big guys who just fuck people down on power bombs and just generally don't look after people in wrestling. And that's something that I've always loved so much about Kane, is that he is so professional. So professional. I think he might go down as arguably the most underrated big guy of all time. I really believe that. I really believe that. I have nothing but love for Kane as a wrestler, and I think when it's all said and done, he's probably going to be one of my sneaky underrated favourites. I just love him that much. Just awesome. Main event time. His WrestleMania rematch once again. The triple threat from WrestleMania, the main event for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's Triple H versus HBK versus, look over there, it's Triple H and HBK. You've got nothing here to see here. Keep moving. Mr. Redacted is back. Chris Benoit.
Floating title belt.
It's the World Heavyweight Championship defending itself against HBK and Triple H. Yeah, so this is the rematch from WrestleMania 20. Now, obviously, anyone who listened to our last podcast would know that we were fairly critical of the main event of WrestleMania and felt that it didn't match up to the standard of what we expected it to be for a WrestleMania main event. And then what really fucks me off is, while I'm watching this, during the admittedly fantastic promo vignette they had for the build-up to this match, HBK says at one point, some people said we had the greatest WrestleMania main event of all time. In what fucking world did anyone say that? You fucking cretin! Bearing in mind that The Rock and Austin 3 times went to war before this. Get yourself out. This is the guy who had an Iron Man match with Bret Hart, widely regarded as one of the greatest technical wrestlers to ever live. No. Shut your whore mouth. Here comes the main event, though, and I believe we're going to have contrasting opinions, because I actually thought this was fucking awesome. I really enjoyed this. Was the main event I wanted for WrestleMania. Now, it's quite long. It is long. This is 30 minutes long, this match. It's almost like you could definitely get a feeling of they felt regret from Mania 20, that they didn't get in as much as they should have. So it was longer, it had more spots, it had more storytelling. The premise is still the same, of course. Chris Benoit is, everyone's like, you're just a one-hit wonder, you're a fluke champion. You can't do it when the pressure's on, especially in front of your hometown, in front of your own people, which is, where he's at.
He's a choker, you could say.
Oh my lord. So Chris Benoit, Triple H, HBK, go out there. This is a great match. The crowd hijacked the shit out of this match, don't they? Holy cow. So Shawn Michaels is going to get it. I don't think he's had a pay-per-view match in Canada since Montreal. So this is like a big fuck you. And he loves it as well. You can see it in his face. He's like, yes, boo me, you cunts. Like, he's good at being the heel, even though he was kind of a face at this point. And Triple H kind of almost becomes almost like a bystander, actually, for a lot of points during this. Very, very unique, very, very interesting, very strange. It's a good match, though. It is a good match, for me at least. I really enjoyed it. I like the storytelling. I felt that the Chris Benoit aspect of things was slightly overdone. Like, every time he gets in the ring, super kick, pedigree, get out, you're not welcome. It's like, yeah, but you kind of need this guy in the match because he's the technical spine of it all. So it's actually quite weird and jarring if he doesn't get involved in the match more. But ultimately, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought this was the main event that should have been at WrestleMania. And if it had been, I would have been far more, shall we say, praising of WrestleMania 20 as a whole. I don't understand why this match didn't find its way onto Mania 20.
Yeah, the match is good. There's nothing wrong with the match as a wrestling match, and I don't have a problem with the fans. They made it kind of more entertaining. I think the problem for me that takes me out of it is I don't know if I see any of these three guys as marquee guys. As weird as that is to say, because they are three of the best in-ring workers of all time. Was Shawn Michaels ever really the guy in WWE? Because like his first time around, it was Brett and Diesel and Taker, and there always seemed to be he was putting on great matches. Even when he was world champion, it was more about kind of when was Brett gonna kind of get it back, and then it was about Austin, and then he was out, and when he came back, Triple H was very much the top dog, and Shawn never really, again, he consistently put on great matches, but he never really became the guy. So I don't see any of these three as being the guy, and they've all got an argument as being, someone who's the most hard done by in that. All three of these should have been the guy. But, Triple H was champion for a lot of time, many times. It's got a lot of illustrious wins, a lot of fantastic moments, a lot of great matches to his credit. But was he ever like the guy? Were you ever like, I've got to tune in and see what Triple H is doing this week? No, I don't think so. Maybe you were for Shawn Michaels, but it was more about who he was against than Shawn Michaels himself. I think Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest that's ever done it. But so is Chris Jericho. And Chris Jericho has never been the guy. I look at both of them on the exact same level for me. Two of the best ever, but they've never been the guy. Obviously Jericho is now in AEW in a completely different entity and a different premise. And obviously Benoit was never the guy. This was an experiment. Let's see if, Benoit is credible. Someone who's small but aggressive and technically proficient can be the guy. Just on the basis that he's a fantastic wrestler rather than, anything to do with charisma, because he didn't have really any charisma. And I just found it, I was just kind of sat there just looking and thinking, all three of these are fantastic bell to bell. And there's nothing wrong, really, with the rivalry they've had and the build to it. The promo video was really good, like you said. But any of these talents that make me say, right, this is why I'm tuning into WWE this week. And actually, when you look at this roster overall in 2004, other than maybe The Undertaker, is there anyone that you would say that about in 2004? I don't think there is. Before John Cena's got there, Ric Flair's, fucking 912 at this point. Is there anyone on this roster who you feel that about? And that was kind of what kept dominating my thinking as I was watching the match. Like, these three are really good. But who is the marquee talent? Who, if you're putting that and saying, right, Triple H is on this show, does that mean I'm going to, right, that's it, I'm going to tune. I'm so excited to see Triple H. Shawn Michaels, bell to bell, as good as there's ever been. And before his injury in the Attitude Era, great on the mic. After that, I found him actually pretty boring on the mic. Like, God Squad dad joke Shawn Michaels didn't turn me on at all. And Benoit obviously was a charisma vacuum who happened to be an incredible wrestler. I don't know. It's just Eddie Guerrero maybe is the only, him and The Undertaker were probably the two. Kurt Angle, sorry, I forgot Kurt Angle existed for a minute there. Those were the guys that I would tune in and be like, yeah, they've got a bit of everything. But yeah, that's what it kind of just took me out of the match a little bit. That was my thinking. Would you say, maybe you'd say Shawn Michaels, would you say any of these three guys are really marquee in the way that WWE has presented marquee over the years?
Some kind of realization has just hit me that Shawn Michaels is widely considered, and in my mind, to be the greatest overall wrestler of all time. If you consider match quality, main events, charisma, everything that goes with it. But I've actually just realized that no, he's not the marquee guy. He's not Stone Cold. He's not The Rock. He's not Undertaker. And even then, Undertaker would be argued is not marquee,
absolutely,
in that way. A lot of people say that about Undertaker as well. He was just the longevity and great honor and distinction. He's no Hulk Hogan. And thank God for that, in so many ways. But yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, you're probably bang to rights, actually. And we don't think about it that way because we have the luxury of hindsight and the ability to say, oh yeah, all three of these guys are like legends. Yeah, they are, but they're not the marquee guy. And there's the distinction there. There's this distinction between being a legend and being marquee. Even Eddie Guerrero wasn't marquee. Not for me.
No.
He's just fucking amazing and a charisma oozing out of him. And it would have been marquee if given enough time, I think, as champion. Ultimately, his reign is cut way too short as well, which doesn't help. It must be quite jarring, actually, I imagine, when you look at it in that way, because this is three great guys, but none of them are truly marquee stars. And because of that probably disassociates people. Also, this main event is heavily loaded towards Benoit to the point of ridiculousness. I'm surprised I'm surprised he doesn't tar and feather them with maple syrup. It gets so ridiculous. Like, it's just Canada. Like, that's all it is. Jerry Lawler is good to a point in this match, but even he is way too over the top in going on about, yeah, Benoit, fuck you, Benoit, you're a one-trick pony, yeah, fuck off. Like, it's like, yeah, it's going a bit over the top now, mate. Like, the idea is sell it to the point where we know that Benoit won't retain, when ultimately he will. And I remember watching it even back then at 19 years old. I remember watching this and thinking, oh, Benoit's going to win. He's in Canada, he's got to win. Like, even then, I didn't feel like there was any true jeopardy. One thing I did like about this was the storytelling and the use of Bret Hart as a whole. So obviously the crowd's being super smarky, you screwed Bret and all these kind of things. Then the sharpshooter gets locked in and they lose their fucking minds. And ultimately it's the sharpshooter that is Shawn Michaels' undoing. And do you know what? You mentioned God-fearing Shawn Michaels as well. Not nearly as exciting. He's a far better wrestler now and a far more exciting main eventer, but he's nowhere near as entertaining, is he, from a charisma standpoint, as he was as the sexy boy. And this is a great main event. This is the main event that a wrestling student or a wrestling aficionado should be watching, but this is not a main event that I would recommend to a casual wrestling fan or somebody who wants the razzmatazz. This is not Hulk Hogan versus The Rock from WrestleMania 18. This is not Austin versus The Rock. This is not, Undertaker versus Kane from WrestleMania 14. This is the thoroughbreds match to a lot of people. Fine technical display, great match. Yeah, I completely see all your points, to be honest, and I kind of agree with all of them in hindsight when you look back at them all. But ultimately, Chris Benoit stands tall. There's this lovely, beautiful, emotional moment where he overcomes it all. He gets Shawn Michaels to tap again, and I actually think this had more poignancy to it than the main event of WrestleMania 20. When you look back at what it means, and you see Nancy, standing there applauding him, and you just think, fuck me. Like, he murdered her. Like, and she's standing right there supporting her husband in his greatest triumph at Backlash. You just
does make it harder to watch as well.
Yeah,
doesn't
it does.
I think it is. It does make you feel a bit weird, like, because Benoit as a wrestler, bell to bell, is as good as there has ever been. So let's just objectively, that's just factually true, okay? But because of the emotion wrapped up in everything that he went on to do that we know about now, to kind of sit there and watch him doing it, and as you say, his wife's there, and the way that people are kind of really kind of going for him because he was this kind of vicious underdog, it's very disconcerting, and that's one of the things again that kind of just took me out of the match a little bit. It is jarring seeing Redacted have all of these beautifully emotional moments. And the weird thing is that this match now I can enjoy this match as a wrestling spectacle more than I would have done watching this match at 15, 16, 17, whatever. But would see if I saw that this was going to be a main event. If I think back to, 14, 15-year-old me, Attitude Era age me, would I have been excited for it? And I don't think I would have been. That's the thing. I think I would have been like, okay, that will be, a good match to have on the card. But to have as a main event for the world title, I would have been quite, I don't know, a bit kind of underwhelmed by, because of the name value being sort of, I know they're all really good wrestlers and they'll have a good match, but where's the kind of the real draw for me to kind of, where's the emotional investment coming? Because I've never really emotionally invested in Triple H. As you say, Shawn Michaels wasn't as entertaining now, and Benoit's a charisma vacuum. So where was the real emotional investment for me, rather than me sitting there going, wow, this was a series of excellently applied holds. It was a really good technical match. It's just that thing of, I don't know, there was just a little bit of something missing from it for me, which I felt at Mania as well, and was kind of, I think I understood what it was a little bit more as I watched the Backlash. But I like, all three are incredible talents, and Shawn Michaels is arguably the best ever. It's him, Ric Flair, for actual being an all-round complete, brilliant in the ring, brilliant entertainer. Those two are kind of at the all-time pinnacle. Yeah, I don't know. There's something missing a little bit for me from this match and from the marquee, if you like, which actually the whole of this period of WWE has. This is a time, we did mention it at the Royal Rumble podcast, they're starting to try and build new talent. Okay, we're going to try and give you something fresh, something different. We've lost the marquee stars. We're going to have to make some more. We haven't got anyone to sign from anywhere else. This is it. So we're going to have to make some. And yeah, this is them making Benoit a marquee star. And this is them, they're making Eddie Guerrero a marquee star a couple of pay-per-views ago. So I don't know. It just didn't quite work to a full extent with Benoit in particular. They tried it with Randy and then shit the bed and went back to Triple H. And that's kind of the thing through this year. They want to make stars, but they get scared every time they start to build them. And so the build kind of falls flat. And that's what we'll see as the year goes on, I think.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I'm thinking back to 2004's Legacy already. We're 4 pay-per-views in. There's a long one. and I'm already sitting here thinking, where are the stars at? Like, this is an era, this is a dry spell, isn't it? This is the tough era for WWE. There is no Rock anymore. Rock makes fleeting appearances. Austin is a carny GM and slowly gets phased out over this period anyway, I believe. So, this era is the experimentation era, and the era of WWE looking towards the future. And ultimately, what's so special about this year is the stars that are built from it go on to become the household staples of WWE for more than a decade. All the guys that we see as legends now, Randy Orton, John Cena, Edge, even Christian to a small extent,
Batista.
Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Batista, they all flourished from this point, really. Even Hardcore Holly. It's kind of weird, but because of Benoit's legacy and what he left behind in terms of the horrific nature of how he left and that, it does make watching this awkward viewing for some. And it's very hard to sit there and suspend your disbelief. Like, I find myself doing it okay in his matches, but then you're always reminded of it. And then you see his wife at ringside, or you see his kids, and you think, Jesus. Like, this is the grimmest of all atrocities of what happened. And, I said it at WrestleMania that beautiful moment is erased from history, so to speak. And this one even more so. This is such a perfect moment for wrestling. You think about, Chris Benoit, like JR says, doesn't he, on commentary? Oh, Chris Benoit, $20 he had in his pocket when he moved abroad to try and become a wrestler. He's basically homeless. He achieved everything you could dream of and climbed to the mountaintop after the hardest graft an amateur or independent wrestler will ever have to go through. He was the hardest working wrestler in the history of wrestling. And all of that is wiped out in an instance. And then you also factor in that there's a large likelihood that a lot of it had to do with what he needed to do and what he needed to give to become that. And the ironic thing is, the ultimate sacrifice of, chair shots and bumps and bruises and the journey of 18 years to become, WWE champion, world heavyweight champion, all of that, and it ultimately is wiped out because of that. It's that, he didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be a psychotic murderer. This was ingrained in his brain. Chris Nowitzki, who, of course, is well regarded as the Harvard douchebag of characters in WWE, actually a very legitimate concussion scientist, went on to open his own concussion clinic. And he studied Chris Benoit's brain. He said this guy had the brain of an 88-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Why do you think that is? Through trauma and collision and CTE and all these things. You look at how NFL has reacted to helmet-to-helmet hits now. You get 25 grand fine immediately if you hit someone helmet-to-helmet. Because they know that people are dying at a rapid rate from the old era of wrestling and American football and whatever sport you want to put in there with these severe collision issues. And ultimately, everything that led Chris Benoit to this point, to becoming Canada's great champion, to retaining the title in front of all of his friends and family, and this rapturous reaction to him winning at not only WrestleMania 20, but also this Backlash, which is probably so forgotten because we all remember Eddie and Benoit so much from 20, and I actually think this is right on a par with it. I think this is just as big a deal. It's all wiped out because of the work he put in. That's the tragedy of this story, of the story of Chris Benoit. The tragedy isn't that Chris Benoit was evil. The tragedy is that everything that Chris Benoit did to become the great legend of technical wrestling, to become that guy who won the title at WrestleMania 20, that is wiped out in an instant because all of the things that he did to get to that point are what ultimately drove him to commit the greatest atrocity in wrestling history. And that is a really tragic legacy. To think that all of that beauty and journey and brilliance is what ultimately took away his life as well. That's really, really hard to comprehend as a fan, as a wrestler myself, as a human being. It's a tough one. And ultimately, if you take away this main event and the hardcore match, this is a bit shit, isn't it? This show. Let's be honest.
The women's match as well was good, but Yeah, it's like you get, here's something good, here's something terrible, here's something decent, here's something awful. It's just, that all the way through. Shelton and Ric Flair was decent, but...
This is like WrestleMania again. So a third of it is brilliant, and the rest of it is utter toss.
Yeah, it's a shit sandwich. Like, the bread's fine. It's just you get the shit as well. You got no choice.
Yeah, it turns out that of our chicken salad sandwich, half of the chicken is severely undercooked and will give us food poisoning. Thank you, Jonathan Coachman and Rosie and Eugene. Can I recommend this pay-per-view? Again, just like WrestleMania 20, there are matches on here you must watch as a fan. You must see the hardcore match. It means so much to so many people and so many careers, and for the embetterment of what it meant to be a hardcore wrestler. You have to see the main event if you're a wrestling purist. If you want an example of what great main event storytelling and wrestling is, this is a fine match. And also, it's a very good educational tool for what Benoit used to mean to wrestling, because the newer generation will only see Chris Benoit, the Maniac. They won't see what came before that. But the brand split hurt these pay-per-views severely, I think. And the ironic thing is, the one pay-per-view we've watched, which, two of them that weren't brand split, weren't actually that phenomenal in the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. And that alarms me no end. So I'm really hoping that SummerSlam is going to, come to fruition. I am dreading the next pay-per-view because it's Judgment Day. And I know what the main event is, and I know what happens in the main event. And I remember being angrier than I've ever been in the history of wrestling when I saw the result of the main event. So I'm praying that pay-per-view as a whole is going to hold up, but this brand split thing doesn't work, and it certainly doesn't work for Raw. And you could tell that Paul Heyman was chuckling his ass to the bank as the creative lead on SmackDown, because SmackDown had the majority of the great workers. But I say that, I mean, this show had Chris Benoit, Shawn Michaels, and Chris Jericho and Christian. It should have worked. Placement is so key here. And also, I tell you what, never underestimate good tag team wrestling, because once again, we were fed tag team horse shit. And ultimately, that is what hurts a show. You need a good, solid tag team division. This didn't have it. It's a very lackluster pay-per-view with 2 or 3 tremendous shining lights.
Yeah, completely agree. It's a really... It is just, this was good. Oh, no, this is terrible. And, I don't think, other than Foley's backstage promo, were there any segments backstage that were anything other than terrible? I don't think there was. And it was, not only will we get into bad wrestling matches, but just the entertainment portion of WWE was crap as well. And that's what's really annoying. But as you say, there are some shining lights that people should watch. As you really brilliantly said as well, it's not just about go and watch a really good wrestling match and see what Benoit used to be. As you say, it's understanding that was part of the journey that kind of ended up with how he got to where he was. So when you're sitting there and you're advocating for, chair shots to the head are cool, they look great, they sound great, they serve a purpose. It's great when we see really risky, spots where people spike on their heads and it's fantastic. Well, actually, let's look to see what the long-term ramifications of that have been in the worst-case scenario. It's not just someone sitting there and shivering in a chair pissing themselves. It is, that turning to rage and the memory loss and all of those things. So let's, I think it's important to understand that for, fans to appreciate the product and what the people they're watching are putting themselves through, but also for wrestlers to watch and say, look, I know this was quite a long time ago now, but it's not as if human anatomy has changed that much that you can go back to how it used to be. So, there's definitely elements that should be watched. And actually, I'd recommend the women's match as well for people to go back and watch the the Lita and Victoria match, because that was an example of there was talent on this roster in this period. They just weren't being, used and positioned effectively, because to Vince, what Sable and, Stacy Keibler could bring to the party was far more important than basically anything else. So, I think that pretty much wraps up Backlash, doesn't it, mate? And we've got, as you say, I think it's Judgment Day next.
Yeah, it does, mate. Yeah, for everyone listening who's joining us on this crazy journey across 2004, Judgment Day is up next. check it out if you want to. Obviously, if you haven't seen Backlash, but you found yourself feeling a little bit more inspired to check it out, then absolutely take our recommendations as a pinch of salt, and most importantly, try and enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and it creates a lot of topics, and it's the one thing I'm really appreciative of, and I'm grateful that I get to do it with you, Mr. Neil, because well, I cannot imagine Nick Payne being quite as eloquent when it comes to discussing Chris Benoit and the issues of women's wrestling, and of course a character with a level of mental retardation. So
Yeah.
He fucking killed someone. He's a retard and it's funny. And then I'll get their tits out and that. Way.
That's my Nick Payne impression.
that's hauntingly accurate. If anyone doesn't believe me, check out our AEW Full Gear review, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. My God, if you'd heard the outtakes for that, we would have been censored for life. Jesus. Yeah, pretty much. Steve Neal, thank you very much for joining us for Manic Mondays, as always, brother.
Cheers, man. Absolute pleasure.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. We will catch you very soon for more nonsense from Manic Mondays. Of course, every Monday we release a retro podcast. We'll be covering the entirety of 2004. And of course, when that's done, we will decide on another arc, another adventure. And of course, you will have all the input involved in that as well. A couple of little house cleaning things, just because I know, I believe by the time this episode drops, we'll pretty much be prepped and ready for the end of year awards. Amazing stuff. Yeah, because it is the end of December. First of all, for anyone listening, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Very weird saying that at the end of November. But yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Enjoy yourselves, look after yourselves, enjoy your families, be nice to each other, try and buy something nice. And if your mum gives you a sweater for the 14th time, just smother her with it in her sleep. She'll never know. She'll never, ever know.
Stop watching Benoit matches immediately.
God damn it, Chris! Look what you've done to me. So yeah, it's not funny in any way. We're just trying to make light of a horrific situation. Enjoy your Christmas, obviously. And as far as the end of year awards go, voting will probably pretty much be done. But as we'll be recording it at the end of the year, please check out all the polls that we've got out there. Check out all the subjects. If you've got any recommendations, shall we say, honorable mentions, make sure you send them in to us. Let us know who you thought was the best wrestler of the year, you know, from WWE to Ring of Honor to Impact to AEW, everything. Let us know who's really touched you this year. Not in that way, obviously, show us on the Dole Miller, but ultimately, yeah, just kind of interact, let us know. And as far as Manic Mondays goes, keep contacting us, letting us know what you want us to discuss next. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, God, these lads have gone over quite a bit of the 2000s, maybe something a bit more old school. If you don't let us know, we can't really kind of push in a direction that you want. We can only really sort of pick what we know is good enough, you know, and stuff like that. We've obviously had some creative decisions and kind of picked things that ultimately we're going to enjoy, but also we really like hearing what you guys think as a whole across all the board. And of course, every Monday and Thursday podcasts drop wherever you get your podcast. You'll be able to hear the Wrestle Plug every Monday and Thursday without fail. Enjoy Christmas, enjoy the new year, and we'll catch you very soon for more nonsense from Manic Mondays.